1993, it was the deadliest year in Richmond since the Civil War, 160 murders. But the slaying of the 71-year-old woman here was one of the worst I can remember. It was so violent, so sexually vicious, so ugly. Investigators were certain that a man did it. It took them 3 years to find out they were wrong.
The apparent motive? Robbery. Jewelry and cash was taken after the home in the quiet West End was broken into.
Carolyn Cook, widow, animal lover, a longtime and admired volunteer at St. Mary's Hospital, where she'd logged 8,000 hours. Flags flew at half staff there after she was found murdered in the living room of her nice West End home. For years, her autopsy report was a closely guarded secret, but some of us in the media knew it was bad.
I mean, there was blood in the kitchen, in the dining room. It was a small house in both bedrooms. It just seemed like an animal got a hold of her.
It's hard to forget.
Almost every square inch of her body was covered with contusions and lacerations, often to the bone. Her lips were ripped. Virtually every rib was shattered. She had been sexually assaulted with a broomstick so violently, her liver and kidneys were damaged.
They thought it was a man because of the fact of the way the murder had taken place.
She was wonderful. She was a nice lady.
Neighbors remember their 71-year-old friend as generous and caring, especially when it came to her many pets.
I liked her right off the bat because we both love animals.
Beth Damerol was her neighbor, a tireless voice for the widow.
My husband and I were her go-to people. If something was the matter, she called us.
Beth refused to let Carolyn Cook become forgotten. Just one piece of the frightening puzzle that was the Golden Years murders, a series of a dozen slayings of older women in their homes. You may remember, for the first half of the 90s, it was the crime stories.
It just blew my doors off that they couldn't solve it.
3 years and 3.5 months went by, and then...
Obviously pleased to announce that we have in fact made an arrest on one of the homicides that we were looking at through the Golden Years Task Force.
Sources tell us her name is Monique Anderson, and she is from the Fairfield Court section of Richmond. She was 15 years old when Cook was murdered.
Just kind of blew us all away, I think. We all kind of sat around in the room and stared at each other for a few minutes. You know, it was some young girl, and that she was as vicious as she was.
Monique Anderson's fingerprint had been found on a can of starch that had been sprayed on the victim. The girl, by then 18, admitted she broke into the volunteer's home to steal and became enraged when Cook came home and confronted her.
She had the ability to act perfectly normal. She could engage in a conversation and she could actually be quite likable, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't quite there.
I said, she looks like a Cabbage Patch doll. She looks like you want to take her home and feed her. She does not look wicked, but she has done wicked things in her childhood.
The girl's past, revealed in court, read like Carolyn Cook's autopsy. Bizarre damage everywhere.
Everything about her history was bizarre. She clearly probably suffered from fetal alcohol syndrome.
Mental health professionals had been involved in her life since kindergarten.
All through her reports were she had cut ears and legs off of puppies, cooked them in the oven.
Monique's history fit a behavior pattern for a child arsonist, including sexual conflicts, learning disabilities, antisocial behaviors, and violence against animals and humans. When asked about her cruel behavior, she generally laughs.
Well, she was obviously mentally ill. The problem is she fell into that category of people that are very dangerous to the community, but they don't really meet the definition of insanity.
Because she was street smart.
Yes.
Here, right before your mom broke into the home of Michael Welton, stole jewelry and currency. A week later, knocked on the door of Miss Leslie Hobson's home and asked for a glass of water. She entered home and took currency.
It was Monique's street smarts. She was good at lying and covering up that got her tried as an adult in a 55-year sentence.
When the judge says, "Did you have anything to say to us or anyone before I sentenced you?" she turns right to me in the crowd and says, "I'm sorry, I won't kill your mother again. I promise I won't kill her again."
Monique is 36 now. She's been eligible for parole for 6 years. Her latest hearing was earlier this month, and the parole board will soon decide whether she'll get out, which is highly unlikely at this time. Now, I sent a letter to Monique Anderson asking for an interview, and I also went through the Department of Corrections, but she turned me down. But eventually, she will get out. She'll have served all of her time by 2034. And then what?
Well, it's actually a big problem in Virginia. There are many people that are sort of damaged the way she was, and there's a real lack of treatment facilities to handle someone like her.
I'm afraid of her. I think she's extremely dangerous, but yes, I do have pity for her because it's not her fault, and there's nowhere in this world for her.
So what's the answer? Right now, there doesn't appear to be one for Monique Anderson or the people who are afraid of her. That's what makes this one of the most troubling scenes I can remember. In the West End, Mark Holmberg, CBS 6 News.